The Public Affairs Department of WALA Fox 10 presents your Social Security Report.
Good morning, everybody. May I come in? Thank you very much. And do you realize this is the last part of November? One more month and the whole year will be gone. And I think next week, perhaps we better review those changes in Social Security for 1999, but let's just put those aside for a few moments. I'd like to tell you about a letter that I received a few days ago from a gentleman raising a question about a subject that I hadn't thought about for a long time, and I'm sure some have never even heard about it, and others have heard about it and forgotten all about it. It's about that group of good folks whom Aunt Landers christened the Notch Babies, those born between 1917 and 1921. And then those who tried to make more out of it have just stretched that on beyond 1921. But actually, 1917 to 1921 are the official figures for the Notch Babies. Let me tell you all about it. Well, in simple language, I hope, so I can understand too. It was back in the 1970s that inflation began to roar ahead. And the actuaries who take care of all of the figures in Social Security looked at the benefits going out and they said, we're not paying these people enough to keep up with inflation. So Congress said, well, come up with some good figures. So they did. They came up with a different method of figuring the benefits, a more generous method. And they said this would apply now to those who were born between 1912 and 1960. Those are the ones who will be retiring now. And it will also apply to death benefits and disability benefits. Well, it wasn't long before they began to realize that they had sort of gone overboard. They had been too generous. And they said, well, if we continue to pay at this rate, we're going to bankrupt the system before 1990. So Congress said, well, you better take another good look at it and make whatever changes are necessary. So back to the drawing boards, and they came up with a different method of figuring the benefits, which wasn't nearly as generous as what they did have then. But they said, now, it's not going to be fair to slap this on the people right away, because those who are becoming 62 and 65 in the immediate future have been looking at those figures that the folks are drawing, and they're making their plans based on these figures. And so it wouldn't be fair to them to come in with a different figure right now, totally different from the ones that they see that these folks are getting. By the way, in Social Security, we used to call those born between 1912 and 1916 the bonanza babies, because they reaped a real bonanza because of the mistake that was made by the actuaries. So the actuary said, well, let's do this. Let's give those born between 1917 and 1921, the ones whom Aunt Landers called the Notch Babies. And incidentally, she wrote a column later on correcting all of that. But, of course, far fewer people read that column than they did that first column, because so many think they've been cheated if they were born between 17 and 21, or even beyond that. So the actuary said, now, let's give them a combination of some of this more generous system and then some of the system that we're going to have to put into effect so that the system is not going to go bankrupt before 1990. So those born between 17 and 21, those called the Notch Babies, got a combination of the generous system and the newer system. And those born after 1921 get entirely the newer system. But in all fairness to them, you have to point out that they have longer in which to be working and building up their earnings records on which the benefits are based. So these Notch Babies were not cheated out of anything. They just didn't get the benefit of a bonanza that those born between 1912 and 1916 got. I've always used to say when I was with Social Security, take two men who went into a store and bought the same item. Well, I'll have to tell you about that a little bit later, because I see the clock on the wall is winding up at me and saying, look, you got to go for a few moments, so will you excuse me? I'll be right back.
If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of the Mobile area, please write to the Social Security Administration, Mobile District Office, 9 St. Emmanuel Street, Mobile, Alabama, 36606, or call 334-441-6165. If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of Jackson, Alabama, please write to the Social Security Administration, 150 College Avenue, Jackson, Alabama, 36545, or call 334-246-6018.
Thank you for letting me come back and letting me continue with my story. When I was with Social Security, I used to explain that about the notch babies and the bonanza babies this way. I'd say 2 men went into the store and bought the same item, costed the same amount. They were both checked out at the same time. But the first one going out gave the cashier a $10 bill. Well, something distracted her over there, and somehow she got the idea that he gave her a $20 bill. So she gave him change for 20. Well, he looked at it, he grinned, and he walked on out. Well, the next man that came behind him saw what had happened. So he gave the cashier a $10 bill. She took the change, took it out for the change for the item, and she gave him the correct change for a $10 bill. He looks at it and says, "Hey, you gave him change for a 20. Why don't you give me change for a 20 also?" Well, I say, that's the bonanza baby that got that change for a 20 when he gave only a 10, and this is the man who's the notch baby. He got the correct change, and that's the way it has been all along. The notch babies were not cheated out of anything. They just didn't get the windfall that those born between 1912 and 1960 got. And when you hear the talk about the government's got to do something to make up to these notch babies, frankly, I say, don't hold your breath. I don't think anything is going to happen because there's nothing to do about it unless you want to go back to those bonanza babies and say, look, you've got to pay back what you got by mistake. But let's move into some of these questions that came in during this past week. This good gentleman said, you know, I've been thinking about this Medicare business, about these premiums. Now, I'm very, very pleased and very gratified to see that last year, we had practically no rise in the amount of the premium. This year, for this coming year, 1999, it's a modest rise, $1.70 a month more, making it go up to $45.50 a month. But I've heard people say in the past, oh, sometime in the 2000s, we're going to be paying $75 a month for our premium for Medicare Part B, the doctor bill part. Do you think there's anything to those stories? Well, there's a possibility, yes, because we just don't know what the future is going to hold in the way of inflation. I well remember when Medicare started, or just before Medicare was to start, I had been in the hospital, and my bill was $35 a day. Well, we had one of our officials down from headquarters talking about the Medicare that was going to go into effect, and he said, you know, this Medicare is really going to be a godsend to many, many people, because we could easily see in the near future that a hospital cost is going to be $100 a day. I thought, that's wild. Why just pay $35 a day? Well, if you have to be in the hospital any time lately, you know that even $100 a day sounds wild now on the downside, not the upside. But I don't think that any time in the immediate future or in the foreseeable future that we're going to see a premium for Medicare Part B anywhere near $75 a month. I feel that the government and the insurance companies and the medical profession have done a very good job in holding things on the line, holding the line on things. And we're not going to see huge rises in the Medicare premium. But there will always be a gradual rise to take care of the cost of living going up. And this question came from a gentleman who's drawing the SSI. He said, I'm drawing that SSI not because I'm disabled, but because of my age. and because of my lack of assets. Well, I've got a chance to pick up a little job now at the minimum wage level. Can I work and still draw the SSI? Well, if he doesn't work too many hours, yes, he could. If I remember correctly, when I left Social Security some time ago, that you could make up to $60 a month and it wouldn't interfere with the SSI. And then when you went over that, it was a little scale that you went by each amount that you made over that you had to give up a certain amount of the SSI. But I would suggest this. Go ahead and get that job if you can, and then get in touch with the Social Security office. Let them know about how many hours you're going to be working. You're going to be working at the minimum wage, and see how far you can go without being in danger of losing any of the SSI. And of course, if you lost it, then you could come back in if you're not having that income and qualify again for the SSI, I'm quite sure. This gentleman is on the opposite scale, end of the scale. He said, I found that I'm going to have some oil royalties coming to me this year at the end of the year. Now, is that going to interfere with my Social Security check? The answer is no, because dividends, rent, interest, royalties, capital appreciation, sale of property, none of those things are going to interfere with your Social Security benefits. Now, I said sale of property. That is, of course, if you're not in the real estate business. But anything that's called unearned income, which I think is a misnomer, but unearned income is not going to interfere with Social Security. So he doesn't have to be worried at all about taking those oil royalties. And this gentleman was wondering about this. He said, I'm going to be 65 right after the first of the year. I don't plan to retire, but I have friends telling me, well, you better get in touch with Social Security when you reach the age of 65. Do I have to? No, he doesn't. Now, if he does want to enroll for Medicare, yes, I would suggest that he does. But he doesn't have to if he has a coverage already with his employer. But the clock on the wall says you're covered right up to now, but you've got to leave for a few moments, so will you excuse me? And I'll be back in a few moments.
If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of the Eastern Shore, please write to the Social Security Administration, 368 Commercial Park Drive, Fairhope, Alabama, 36532, or call 334-928-2504. If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of Andalusia, Alabama, please write to the Social Security Administration, 408 South 3 Notch, Andalusia, Alabama, 36420, or call 334-222-9701.
It's good of you to let me come back again. Thank you very much. And to take up the story that we were talking about a moment ago about the gentleman who said that he is going to be retiring. Well, not retiring. He said, I'm not retiring. But they tell me I ought to get in touch with Social Security because I'm going to be 65. And do I have to? I said. And I told him, no, you don't have to, unless you want to enroll for Medicare. Now, very often, they'll enroll for the Medicare Part A because that doesn't carry any premium. He's been working. He's been paying that hospital tax, the 1.45%, which is part of the Social Security full tax that you pay. You know, you pay 7.65, and 1.45 of that goes into that hospital fund. So he's been working, and he's covered them for the hospital part. So if he wants to enroll for that, and very often the company will say, go ahead and enroll for the hospital part, and let Medicare pick up there. But he doesn't even have to do that. And for the doctor bill part, if he already has coverage that he's satisfied with his employer, he doesn't have to enroll for the doctor bill part. But be sure, if he doesn't enroll for the doctor bill part, when he reaches 65, that when he does retire, that he gets a letter from the company saying that he has been covered by their company policy. And that way, when he enrolls for the Medicare and he's way beyond age 65, he won't be penalized with a penalty and have to pay a penalty in his premium for the rest of his life. And speaking along that same line, this good lady said, I had to go out to Texas. Well, I felt that I had to because I had very great confidence in the doctor out there because my sister had gone to him. And I went out there for a very delicate operation, and I'm going to be coming back to Alabama to continue the treatment. Now, they told me out there I didn't have to worry about anything as far as the expenses were concerned, that Medicare was covering it. But I'm wondering, does that also extend to Alabama? Will Medicare take care of it here in Alabama, too, for the treatment? And I can see no reason why it wouldn't. If it's just all part of that same treatment that she was getting out there, then I see no reason why Medicare wouldn't take care of it here, because, you know, Medicare covers all 50 states equally. Whether you're in Alaska or Florida or Maine or Hawaii, it doesn't matter. Medicare covers all of them equally. So don't ever be afraid of the fact that you start something in one state and you have to continue it in another state. Medicare is going to cover just the same as it did in that state. It's going to cover the same in this state. And this good gentleman wanted to know, when I retire next year, how many years of my earnings are the Social Security folks going to use in figuring the amount of my benefit? Well, if you were born after 1928, which practically everybody was, those who are retiring now, 35 years are the years of earnings that are going to be used in figuring the amount of your benefit. Now, if you were born before 1929, then you take those last 2 years, the last two numbers in the year of your birth, and you add 6 to that. And that'll say how many that you're going to have to use. But anywhere that they can find 35 years now, and if they can't find earnings in 35 years, you're going to have a blank earnings, blank year, then that is going to have to count against you just a little bit. But 35 are your best years. And you know, that leads into another question that comes up ever so often. If I go back to work after I start drawing my retirement, is it going to do me any good? It could. Because you see, at the end of each year, they take those earnings that came in for that year, and they see if those earnings were better than any of these years back here that were used in computing the benefit the first time. And very often they are. So they drop that year and substitute this year. So if you go back to work, in all probability, it would do you some good. But even if it doesn't, you still have to pay that Social Security tax. And this good gentleman wanted to know, by the way, it seems that all the questions this time came from the gentleman, doesn't it? One came from the good lady. Said, I find that they have no record of my birth in the state where I was born. Now, since I don't have a birth certificate, what kind of hurdle am I going to have to jump over to prove my age when I reach retirement age? Well, he doesn't have to worry about that, because unless he lives before George Washington's time, he's going to be in the U.S. Census record somewhere. They'll be glad to take care of that for him. If he were baptized as an infant, the baptismal record would be good. He'd be glad to take care of it. And there are other records, too. But don't let it stop you by filing your claim if you don't have a birth certificate. Social Security will be glad to help you, be glad to help you prove your age, be glad to point out to you the different things that you can use, and they'll help you get some of those proofs. So be sure not to put it off. When the time comes, or whether it's approaching, go on and get in touch with the Social Security office. They'll be glad to help you. This gentleman said, I'm a victim of all of these downsizings that you hear about and the mergers. They're going to pension me off right after the first of the year, and I've only reached the age of 60. Now, I had planned to retire anyway at the age of 62, but are those 2 years of no earnings going to hurt me when I put in my claim for retirement? Well, it will, yes, but it isn't going to hurt him a whole lot. 2 years out of the time that's going to be used to figure in his retirement benefit. Not going to be a great deal, but it will be a sum. So he has to figure on just a little bit of hurting anyway. But the clock on the wall says, look, we're going to be hurt if you don't leave for a few moments, so will you excuse me? And I'll be right back.
If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of the Pensacola area, please write to the Social Security Administration, Pensacola District Office, 1011 West Garden Street, Pensacola, Florida, 32501, or call 850-434-5488. If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office and are a resident of the Pascagoula, Mississippi area, please write to the Social Security Administration, 1225 Jackson Avenue, Pascagoula, Mississippi, 39567, or call 228-762-3370.
Back for the last roundup. Thank you for letting me come in again. Well, this is a question from a lady. This good lady wanted to know this. She said, my mother is living with me and my husband, and we are her sole support. Well, she has a good friend who says, well, look, you ought to be drawing that SSI from Social Security. Is there anything to that? Could she get that SSI, whatever that is? Well, it is Supplemental Security Income, it's called. It's the federal welfare program, federal welfare claims that are handled by Social Security, but not part of Social Security. And frankly, I'm not sure whether she could or not. If she is totally dependent on them, has no income whatsoever, can't contribute at all to the household expenses, then there's a possibility that she wouldn't be able to qualify for the SSI. But on the other hand, she might. So I always say, get in touch with the Social Security office. It doesn't cost a thing to ask the question. They'll be glad to hear from you, and they'll be glad to give you the answer, because sometimes there's some little something in there that isn't coming out when the question is asked. So I'd say get in touch with the Social Security office, give them the full details of the living arrangements, and then see if possibly she could qualify for the SSI, even though on the face of it, it looks like she's totally dependent on them and has no other way of qualifying. And this good lady wanted to know this. She said, in case of a death or disability of the husband, I've heard you talk about benefits for the children. How much are those benefits for the children? Well, of course, it all depends on what the basic benefit would be for the husband, whether he were living or not, what the basic benefit would be for him. But the child's benefit would be 50% of that basic benefit in retirement and disability cases, and 75% of that basic benefit in a death case. But remember, there is a cap on how much can come to a family. It runs somewhere, I used to say, almost 2 times what the basic benefit is. I'd say now, I think the rules are it would be about 175%, something close to that, of what the basic benefit would be. And then this question came up the other day from a good lady. She said, if a widow has a child 17 years of age, how much can she expect in the way of Social Security benefits? Well, she couldn't get anything unless she is at least 60, or unless she is a totally disabled widow, and then she's at least 50. The child would draw up to the age of 18 or up to the age of 19 if still in high school. But the child has to be 16 or under for the widow to be able to draw anything before the age of 60. But the clock on the wall is beginning to tell me very frantically that your time is just about up and you're going to have to go. So I'll look forward to being with you next week. Will you let me come in then? By the way, it'll be next month too, the month of December. So until then, thank you for letting me visit with you this time. And I say from the heart, and I mean it, God bless you all, every last one of you, in a very hearty and heartfelt goodbye.
This has been your Social Security Report, a public affairs presentation of WALA Fox 10. This program has been pre-recorded broadcast at this time. If you have questions or need assistance from the Social Security Office, please call 1-800-772-1213.